Hello, it's Concord Wind. Um, if you've been keeping up with my videos, which some of you have, I've noticed a couple of you, and that's really cool. It makes me feel better about this channel, knowing that at least a couple of people are watching. It's nice. Um, had 2 cups of coffee. I don't want to drink anymore because I had 3 cups of coffee yesterday, and I had really bad anxiety. So I'm trying to keep it down to two. It's really tempting to drink another one though, but I'm trying to learn from what I experienced yesterday. Also had anxiety because I did something really stupid. um, I went on this website a couple of days ago. Actually, I went on this website that I've been to before, but I was like struggling with lust, and I was like in the heat of the moment, like wanting to talk to somebody about lustful things. And so I went to this website where you can talk to people about lustful things. I won't say the name of the website, and I also will not um, divulge what was said. But it was inappropriate, lustful, nasty stuff. And I said some things that were kind of sketchy, like and I was really nervous because even though I had made it clear at the start of the conversation with the person, I made it clear that I just have a thing for shocking people, and none of what I said was true. But then I started saying a bunch of stuff like the next day that and making it sound true, and it wasn't. And so on that website, you're only allowed to send 3 messages per day, or two or three, and so I had to wait like a whole 24 hours. I had to wait until today to send a message explaining that everything I said was not true. Like I had to wait until today to say that. And I feel a lot better now that I've sent that message out. Although the woman I was talking to was disappointed. Like, she didn't even message me back after reading my message about saying all of it was not true or whatever. Like, she was really disappointed. But too bad. I've got to be honest. I can't. I can't just lie, and especially if those lies could potentially get me in trouble. I especially need to be honest. Like, and tell the truth about those things. Like, it's really scary. And I've been praying about it. I've been getting on my knees and praying to God about this because before, like, my lust was a problem about once every other day, and now it's a problem about twice a day. I don't know if it's the caffeine or what, but there's definitely something going on. You know, um, it's very strange, and it's really annoying. Like, I'm really sick of my lust, and I hate how I lose a little bit of control. Like, because I don't want to look at porn. I don't want to have nasty conversations with women online. I don't want to do those things, but when I'm in the moment and experiencing that lust, like, I can't control myself, and those things are the things I want to do in that moment. Like, it changes my desires. Like, I'm sure you all have experience with this. I mean, lust is very powerful. It's more powerful than I am. but I would never like hurt anybody. I would never force myself on anybody. Like I'm a very private, you know, um, introverted person. Thank God. And I don't even flirt with women. You know, like, and I know I've talked about I want to get married, but the whole reason I want to get married is so I have an outlet for lust where I'm not like doing shameful things. It's really embarrassing. You know, like this is not how I want to live my life. You know, and but the lust is just like so strong, and I don't know. Like I saw a girl at the gym last night that she wasn't like conventionally attractive, and I really wanted to say something to her because I thought, she probably doesn't have a boyfriend. She's probably kind of desperate for a boyfriend, and I shouldn't like profile people like that or whatever. But when it comes to approaching somebody you're interested in, you have to profile a little bit. Like I don't know. I just feel like you kind of have to. And so I really wanted to talk to her, but I couldn't even like bring myself to do it. It was really hard, and I didn't do it. Like because I don't want to go for the pretty girls because I know the pretty girls probably have boyfriends, and even if they are single, they're probably not interested in me. Pretty girls usually have very high standards. That's not always the case. I've seen pretty girls with fat, ugly men, married to fat, ugly men or whatever. And, so it's not always the case that pretty girls have high standards, but I don't know. I just feel like the more beautiful the woman, the less of a chance a man like me has with her, And so my whole life, I've always tended to go for the ugly girls because they seemed like within my ballpark, within like in my league, you know. I tended to go for the ugly girls, but I've still managed to get like in relationships with some beautiful women like Kimberly, Glory, and Maria. You know, all three of them are beautiful, and I was in a relationship with them. Not at the same time, but independently, like respectively, I was in a relationship with each one, and so it's not like I've always just only dated ugly girls, but usually if I do like this is it's 100% of the time. 100% of the time, if I date a beautiful woman, which has happened 3 times, 100% of the time, they're the ones who make the first move. Okay, so the only way I can get a beautiful woman is if she makes the first move. Anytime I've made a move on a beautiful woman, it never worked. But if she makes the first move on me, then of course it works because I've always been a kind of desperate person. Um, so like I don't really know how to say no if a woman is interested in me unless she has a boyfriend. Like there was one time I went to a bar and I was hanging out with a couple and their friend. And the friend when the guy in the couple relationship like went to the bathroom, he was like, "Hey, hey, He was doing that, like trying to hook me up with, you know, the guy's girlfriend. And she started talking to me, and I was like, whoa, wait a second. And I was like, look, you've got a good boyfriend. From the little bit of time, I didn't say all of this, but I was just like, you got a good boyfriend. But, looking back, I wish I would have said, like, the little bit of time I've spent with him at the bar, I know that he seems like a decent guy, and you should keep him. You shouldn't be like relationship hopping, like. And she was like, wow, that's really good. And, it made me feel good to turn down a woman that, especially one that was in a relationship, because I don't want to. I'm not a home wrecker, like that's just not who I am. Like, and I didn't want to betray him because, like, it was actually two bars, and at the first bar we went to, I was rapping about how like there's nothing wrong with being white. That was what I was rapping about, and the guy, the boyfriend, was like hyping me up and like going, yeah, yeah, after every verse and stuff that I, rapped or whatever. And at one point, he like put his hand over my head and like grabbed my head to like hug my head, and which I thought was sweet, because because he was white, so he felt like I was giving him a voice, like because we live in a society, especially on the left side, where it's like there's a push for people to make being a white male, especially like a crime. To be white in general is not good, according to the left. But to be a white male is considered like especially bad, because at least a white woman is a woman, and the left loves women supposedly. Um, so it's like I was giving a voice to to any white man that was listening, or even white women, to all the white people who were listening. And that bar was filled with white people. And the reason why, I started rapping about white people, it wasn't just something I pulled out of my butt or whatever. It was in response to a black guy that was in there that went to the jukebox or whatever, and paid to have a rap song play that was like, this was just my interpretation. I don't know if it was actually putting down white people, but it sure sounded like it was putting down white people, so I made a response rap to it. And so like, I don't know. That was a really cool moment, and I didn't want, anyways. I didn't want to betray the guy who hugged my head, because he felt like he had a voice through me. Like he, felt. I don't know what he felt, but I'm sure he felt pretty good. Hearing that and feeling like, and just having that affirmation, like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with being white. Like that's true. There really isn't anything wrong with being white. I mean, it's just God created all races, and I've learned that the reason why white people are hated so much, I think it started with minority minority races in America that are jealous of white people because, white people, um, how do I say this? I mean, like, I don't, okay, you know what? I don't know. I don't know. I don't necessarily, I've got some theories. I don't want to say those theories out loud. You know, I think, like a buzzword that the left uses is like generational trauma. And like the generational trauma that's passed down from one generation, it's trauma that's passed down from one generation to the next, like within black communities, of the fact that like white men once owned, or white people owned like black people as slaves or whatever. And it's like that would be a painful thing to know about your ancestors, but you know it doesn't happen anymore. And as a matter of fact, black people get a lot of free stuff, just for being black. They get, grants to go to college and stuff, which college isn't really good. I mean, college is kind of a brainwashing facility, and if black people went to college, they would just become more extreme from the things that they learn there, like critical race theory and all that garbage. They just make them more racist. I mean, so it doesn't help with their generational trauma, that's for sure. So in a way, the fact that's what they get, you know, for being black, and having that generational trauma is like a free ride to college, where that trauma is reinforced instead of the professors helping them to move forward from it. Like it could almost be said that the system is kind of working against them, but it's on the left. It's the system on the left that's working against them, because even though I'm not a conservative, I have to acknowledge the fact that conservatives do want to move forward from the past, while the left wants to hang on to the past and use the past to judge the present. And you can't judge the present from the past. Like, for example, I used to be a horrible person. I used to tell lies. I used to tell people I was in the Marines and got like discharged, and like I used to tell people I was a professional MMA fighter, and like, like I don't know. I used to be horrible, and I don't know why I'm drawing a blank right now, trying to think of other things I did. Well, I wouldn't take my medicine. The medicine that stabilizes me, makes me normal. I refuse to do that. I would drink and smoke marijuana, and I was very racist. And you can't use the past of who I used to be. Like, you can't use my past to judge who I am now. I'm not the same person I used to be. But the left loves to use the past to judge the present and to even judge the future. And like the I'm not saying the left doesn't have any points, like, or good points. Like, the left does have some good points. I think generational trauma is a real thing. Um, like if I found out, like let's just say the roles were flipped, like it would be a hard time. It would be hard for me to like see black people like the same as I do now as a white person who, with the ancestors that, or the ancestry that, white people have and black people have, and that whole thing was slavery. Like, let's say black people owned white people as slaves. It would be hard for me to see black people the same. And as a matter of fact, like, um, when I was, like several years ago, when I was extremely racist against black people, I had a reason for it. And it wasn't because of anything that was happening in the past. It was because of the phenomenon of like interracial relations where, a black man will get a white woman pregnant and then leave and not pay child support and then go and repeat the cycle with another white woman, like to eliminate the white race, which people have talked about, that like if all black people and all white people were in interracial relationships, that would eliminate the black race and the white race. Like it eliminates the black race too. So like and that little bit of information like helped me a lot, even though at that point I wasn't racist anymore, but it still helped me to understand that their plan like isn't gonna work. But back when I thought their plan might work and I thought they might eliminate the white race and like the black race would be like the dominant race in America or whatever, like the majority race. When I thought that that was a possibility, like I hated black people for it. I was like, why are you trying to eliminate my race? Like just because of things that happened in the past that doesn't happen anymore. And it's not even the same people. The people who did those horrible things to black people are dead. And like the people alive today, they've never owned slaves. You know what I mean? Like, so like I just had a lot of resentment and hatred for black people for their revenge mission. You know, but then I remember reading in God's words that like God sustains each race of people, and that definitely helped me a lot to kind of get over it and understand that it's on an individual to individual basis too. Like not every black person wants to eliminate the white race. As a matter of fact, um, a lot of times when black men are in relationships with white women, they're ostracized. I think I'm using that word correctly. They're outcast, like from black communities. Like black people want nothing to do with them because you know they just look down on that. And so that knowing that helps me kind of understand the reality of what's going on because the media like the news used to say we're going to have a black future and all this stuff, and that stuff just made me sick. And it's like black people already have the majority of Africa, and they have over 1 billion people in Africa. Like, why do they need to be the majority of America? Why can't white people have the smallest population of any race on the planet? Every other race, black, brown, yellow, like every other race has a higher population than white people. White people only have 700 million people, just about, or maybe like just under 1 billion. It's a very small number of people compared to other races. And so let white people have the majority of America and Europe, because that's all we got. And America and Europe are very small compared to like other countries or other continents or whatever. um, just let us have what we have, and we let you have what you have, and that's it. Like I mean, I guess some of the jealousy of white people could be the fact that white people have the majority of America, and America is considered the greatest country on earth. So that could be a big part of it. But it has nothing to do with race. Um, America is the greatest country in the world because generation after generation of people in America have relied on God, and the government acknowledges God and has acknowledged God since the founding of America. And the development and preservation of Christianity is encouraged by the government. You know, so like that's the reason why America is so great. It's because America has like relied on God and acknowledged God and believed in God, and the founding of America was like for the sake of freedom of religion, because um, all the founding fathers of America were Protestant, and they wanted freedom of religion, and they wanted to start a country that, they wanted to build up a country that has freedom of religion, because in Europe they didn't have freedom of religion. Like they just had Catholicism, and like you know Protestant Christians were persecuted, if I remember correctly. So yeah, that was the whole point of why America was founded, was for freedom of religion. And there was other principles, laid out in the Constitution besides just freedom of religion. But people will say that the founding fathers of America were evil because they owned slaves, and it's like they didn't know any better. They were ignorant, and from what I've read and from what I understand, you had to be a pretty evil person to treat a slave poorly. Like the way slavery is depicted in the media, the slaves were treated poorly. Like, you know, being a slave back then for a lot of slaves was like being a part of the family. You had a place to sleep, you had food to eat, you had a roof over your head, you had a family. Slaves were like family back then. In a lot of homes, the slaves were like family. And you just have to treat it by case basis. I mean, there was bad people back then. There's bad people now, and I'm not saying slavery is okay, but it definitely wasn't as bad as depicted in the media. Um, still bad, I guess, but if you're a member of a family and you do some chores here and there, and your payment is that you have a roof over your head, you have food to eat, and you don't have to pay any bills. You just do chores here and there around the house or whatever. Like, that's not a bad deal. Like, that's really not a bad deal. Um, so yeah, I just I wish there was more education on this kind of stuff because like it was just a totally different perspective back then. Like the founding fathers were not evil. They believed in God. They relied on God. They believe all men are created equal. They believed in that. Um, there was just a hierarchy. You know, just like there's a hierarchy today. You know, there's homeless people, and you could almost argue that it would be better for homeless people to be slaves than it would be for them to be on the streets. Because at least if homeless people were slaves, they would have food to eat every day. They would have a bed to sleep in every night. They'd have a roof over their head and they'd have a family. So slavery could eliminate homelessness. That could be argued. Um, because homelessness is the alternative to slavery. Because people who are at the bottom, they become homeless. Or they could be slaves, and which is better. Like, think about that. So like, I don't know, it's a complicated thing. And like, there's always going to be people at the bottom, there's always going to be people at the top, there's always going to be people in the middle. Well, not always. Like, when God remakes the earth, like, people will be equal. And people in the church of Almighty God, are equal. But people in society, there's different levels of status. I have pretty low status myself. You know, um, I'm poor. I don't have a big following on YouTube or Twitter or anything. So yeah, thank God I'm not homeless though. There is programs in place that were apparently put in place by the left. So I'm not saying that everything the left has done has been bad. Like disability and food stamps. I think those things are good things because not everybody can work for money. And, I think the left did a good job implementing those systems and putting them in place and everything. So, the left isn't like wrong about everything, but just like the right isn't wrong about everything. Hold on. All right, I'm back. Um, I don't consider myself to be a political person. I don't consider myself to be on the left or the right, or I don't consider myself to be an independent or a libertarian or an anarchist or anything like that. Like, my ideology is basically just I want to submit to God's arrangements. I want to submit to God's sovereignty, and that's the meaning of life, is to love God with all your heart. And to love God is to submit to God. And to know God is to love God. So the more knowledge you gain of God, the more you love him, the more you want to submit to him. And the more you do submit to him, the more you love him, like and you know, I'm a slave for the truth. I'm a slave to God. You know, I just want him to dominate and take control of my life and arrange whatever he wants for me in my life. And I want to submit to each and every one of those arrangements. And that's my goal, and that's my desire, and that's my ideology, that's my principles, that's my nature, that's everything I am revolves around submission to God. And I'm pretty successful with my submission to God. The only thing I struggle with is that my lust does like overpower me at times, and I don't know how to fight that. There's nothing like look how big this book is. This is all God's words. This is the Word Appears in the Flesh, Volume 1. And it's a huge book, and this is only one book out of 7 books that God has written. God has written 7 books so far, and this is only one. And look how big that is. Can you imagine how big the other ones are? Volume 2 isn't that big, but Volume 3 is about this size. Volume 4 is pretty big. Volume 5 is pretty big. Volume 6 is probably about this size. Volume 7 will be about this size when it's finished being written. And out of all those words and out of all the words in the Bible, there is absolutely nothing said about how to fight back lust. Nothing. Nothing in the Bible, nothing in all 7 volumes of The Word Appears in the Flesh. There's nothing anywhere about how to fight lust. And God knows that. God knows that he hasn't given people any path to practice to fight lust or avoid lust or restrain themselves against lust or whatever. Like, God knows he hasn't provided man with any path to practice to resolve lust, basically. Like, he knows that. He knows he hasn't done that. So, because of that, having that knowledge, knowing that God hasn't done that, I just feel like, oh, that scared me. That was on video too. Yeah, I get mail through the door. So, oh, ready to eat meals for Christmas on December 3rd. It says if you're interested in a meal, call the call the people in charge basically. That's nice. See, that's something that Christianity has had an influence over. And the left implements similar policies, but Christianity had an influence over the implementation of those policies and the ideology behind the implementation of those policies. For example, Christians give the most to charity out of any other group on the planet, if I remember correctly. And the majority of charity organizations are churches. So like it's interesting how the right is considered to be like the Christian political leaning. The majority of conservatives are Christian, apparently. And, the right doesn't believe in handouts, but Christianity is like all about handouts. So that's really interesting that the left adopted the handout policy of Christianity, and the right, who are actually Christians, didn't adopt that policy. Isn't that interesting? It's very interesting. So yeah. All right. That's why I just think everybody on the planet is like every single person is right about at least one thing. There's at least one thing that every person is right about. I don't think there's anybody that's wrong about everything. I don't know. Like, so that's why, like, I don't align myself with any political party, because I think everybody's wrong about some things and I think everybody's right about some things, like, and there's no political ideology that represents what I believe, you know. Um, I think Trump is like okay, I guess. I mean, Trump doesn't represent what I believe. Trump doesn't speak for me. He's not my voice. He's the voice of a lot of people, but not mine. But I don't hate the guy. Um, I like how he talks about God sometimes. I think that's really cool. Um, that's what I like the most about Trump, is that he's a Christian and he has led the country into prayer at least once, that one time that I know of, and I think that's really cool. But other than that, like, he wants to make America rich and he wants to make money, and it's like that stuff isn't really very important to me, really. I mean, I guess it's a little bit important. It has a little bit of weight because America should be strong, and unfortunately, in this world, it takes money to be strong. And I think America should be strong as a counterpoint to China, because China is a very dangerous country and they're very evil. and America should be strong to be able to defend itself against China. So in a way, I do agree with that policy, but at the same time, I don't really agree with his intentions. Not that I know what his intentions are, but I have theories about his intentions, and I think, he just like is a businessman, and he worships money, and I'm not about that, like that's just, but I mean, he's better than Biden for sure. Biden was like, but I still, but like I said, I don't align myself with any political affiliation, any political party. I don't align myself with anybody. I just believe in God and love God, and that's it. I just want to submit to God. That's it. So, anyways, um, guess that's it for the video. And so, God bless and goodbye.